145 square feet, so, a relatively modest size retail establishment. And so it wouldn't be a larger business that would dominate the center. Seventh, the proposed use is consistent with the unique character of the town. Again, the board noted that they would offer unique products not found elsewhere in the duck community and provide a distinctive shopping experience. And eighth, the proposed intensity of uses on site. And there are two parts of this, first of which size not to exceed 3,000 square feet. As I already mentioned, it's 945. And secondly, that any street-facing frontage not exceed 50 linear feet. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this particular unit has no street frontage at all. So after making those findings, at their meeting on February 8th, the planning board members voted unanimously to recommend approval of this special use permit application to establish a formula business. And they have recommended 3 conditions if the council decides to approve. First of which, any signage or exterior building improvements utilizing the corporate logo must be designed and maintained in a manner consistent with the other businesses at the Scarborough Lane shops. Secondly, that any new signage would require a separate permit. And third, that this permit would expire within 12 months if the use is not commenced. And that concludes my presentation, Mayor Cates-Zinn, but I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Does the council have any questions for staff? Does the applicant have any questions for staff? Okay. Does any other sworn witness or planning board have a question for staff? Okay. Thank you. We will now turn over to the applicant for their presentation.
Thank you. My name is Paul Gorey. I'm the Vice President of Retail Stores for Seabags. Honorable Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. Seabags was founded in 1999 on the working waterfront in Portland, Maine. I'm pleased to be here this evening because I left almost a foot of snow, so thank you for that. When you walk out the back door of our workshop where we produce our products, there's several lobster boats lined up that are moored, and it's a part of our working culture, that authentic waterfront. And that's what drew us to Duck. Very charming town, authentic seacoast community, shares a lot of the same values that we have in Portland, Maine. So it was a natural for us to be attracted to your community. Seabags, we actually take recycled sailboat sails, turn them into totes, handbags, and accessories. We actually will print on the sail itself, or we'll sew an applique design on the face of it. And we get those sails through the casual boater or sailor, yacht clubs, marinas. We actually get them from our customers. We have the ability to take sails in trade from a customer who can come into our store, if it's approved in Duck, bring their sail in, and we can trade them a tote bag for their sailboat sail. Those sails then end up going back to Maine, where they're turned into more totes. So the community here fits Seabags, and we would welcome the opportunity to open a business here. May I answer any questions?
All right, does the council have any questions for the applicant? Okay, and I believe there are recommended conditions.
Yes, ma'am, the 3 conditions are perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other questions by any of the sworn witnesses for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this time, we would ask for comment from the planning board.
Thank you, Council.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Kingston, members of the Town Council. For the record, I'm James Cofield. I'm the chairman of the Duck Planning Board. The Duck Planning Board met on February the 8th, considered and voted approval of Special Use Permit 23-002. A couple things worth noting. The Planning Board found that this was a nice fit from the standpoint of compatibility within the Duck image and the Duck climate, meaning the commercial businesses, retail businesses in town. The authenticity of the product is a nice fit within Duck's commercial businesses. The Planning Board agreed with the 8 parameters presented for consideration. And the staff presented and the Planning Board then found that the application met all the conditions and specifications set out in the Town of Duck ordinances. And I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Any questions by the applicant? No. All right. Is there any other evidence or questions that council has before we proceed to close the public hearing? Okay, so at this time, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll turn it over to the council to deliberate and make a vote.
Thank you, Lauren. At this time, any deliberation? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I've been in one of their stores in Maine. They're very nice.
I have also.
I think this, having this opportunity to revisit that ordinance about the formula businesses is nice. I didn't realize it had been that long, 10 years or more, that we've done that, but it was really in reaction to the idea that we did, as you said in your presentation, want to have a lot of Me Too type of stores. But this, in my opinion, is a very good fit and unique, and it does have to go through an extra step to get past it, but it's a nice reminder of what we've done to try to limit, just, too many of the same type of business. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve SUP 23-002, an application by Seabags LLC for a special use permit to establish a formula business in the Village Commercial District at the Scarborough Lane Shops, with the conditions or the recommendations of the Planning Board and the findings of the staff. Perfect.
Any further conversation on the motion on the floor?
No.
There being none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Item number 6, legislative public hearings. We have none at this time. Item number 7, old business deferred from previous meetings. Discussion consideration of appointing 2 individuals to serve on the planning board. I'll handle that from the mayor's chair. We have an immediate opening for the planning board for the next 2 months due to the resignation of member Tim McKeithen. And we have 2 positionings opening up for 3-year terms on May 1st as a result of termination of their 3-year terms on the board. So at this time, we have 8 applicants. We're going to do 3 votes. The first vote we will do will be for a 2-month position. Next 2 votes will be for individuals for the 3-year terms on the planning board. And at this time, if people are here, I'd like to call the list of names, and if you're here, please stand up so the council and the audience can recognize you. Incumbent Randy Morton, James Bartlett, Matthew Price, I bet, Bob Wetzel, Bob, Brenda Chasen, Bob Webb, Scott Miller, and Kevin Lindgren. Kevin? I'm going to ask the town manager and town attorney if they will keep tabs on the election. So we're going to do the first vote for the 2-month. Every council member has 1 vote. And I'd like to open up the nominations by nominating Bob Wetzel.
Don, before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it was 2 planning board appointments in the past where we had people that were applicants that came in and did a presentation to us so that we could learn more about them. And my suggestion is that we do the same thing here, especially since more than half of the people that have applied are not present. So I think that we should, and this is just my opinion, the planning board is probably the most unelected, the most important non-elected position that we have. And I would like to see these people come in that are applying for these jobs and do a presentation so that we can get to learn a little bit about them. And it's my recommendation that we put this off until the April 5th meeting so that they can all be present.
How does the rest of the council feel about that?
That was one thing that wasn't on their application, so I just want to make that aware, being here this evening.
Well, how would you, and I mean, maybe it's, if we have an immediate need, I'm not exactly, it sounds like Tim has already left the planning board, so we're without a member. But I don't disagree with the idea of getting a little bit more background, and how would you feel about them even doing something in writing if they couldn't be here?
Well, yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, look, we're gonna depend on these people to steer us in the right direction regarding further development in the town. I think it's important to us that we understand more about each person, and it's important to them, it should be important to them to participate in this process a little more directly. And so, again, that's my recommendation, or my hope is that we'll postpone this until April 5th, I think is our April meeting, correct? And whoever can be present should be here. If there's some reason that somebody can't be present, perhaps we can get them on a Zoom or something to present on screen.
Do you want to address the 2-month vacancy? So if you go to April, you'll be a month into that kind of residual term without,
Right.
Because you have an open vacancy in that seat. It's certainly in your discretion, but I did just want to mention that.
Well, my own opinion is I don't think that for at least 1 month, being short 1 board member is going to hurt anything. I think that we can survive at least a month with 4 people for now.
What would you like to see, Rob, in addition to what they've submitted already on their
Well,
application?
as we did, I said, like, I think it was 3 years ago, everybody that was applying for that position came in here and did a presentation talking about their background and experience and things that would qualify them as competent members of this board. And again, in my opinion, the planning board is probably the most important unelected position that we have. And so we can't afford to make a mistake. We have to try to deliver the best product that we can for the people in the town, and I don't see how we can do that without further examination.
Just getting into the details on that presentation, is it possible to do a Zoom presentation if they're not available? I wasn't thinking we had that capability, but do we?
Yes.
And would you be thinking about asking them questions?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, because I don't really know all of these people on the list. I wouldn't mind having discussion and hearing them speak and tell us why they're interested and what their qualifications are. Now, if we needed to do something for the immediate opening, I'm okay with that, but can we hear from the floor? Or not allowed?
So I see the planning board chair is raising his hand, but any receiving comment or input from him would be completely up to the mayor at this time.
We'll listen to the chairman, yes.
Again, simply for the record, I'm James Cofield, Chairman of the Planning Board. Just for clarification, Tim's resignation is not until after our March meeting. So he will be in full-fledged at our meeting next week. So his vacancy will not occur until after the March meeting.
So effectively, that's only a couple of weeks that you're down one person.
What is your April meeting date?
April meeting is the 12th, which is after the council
After our
meeting.
council meeting, yeah.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, James. I think it's only fair, though, that we only consider those 8 candidates, and that, in fact, we had given them a deadline as to when to apply. So, I mean, I think it should only apply to those 8 candidates. I don't think we should reopen it, because these are the people that expressed interest and thought tonight that they were going to be considered. Is that fair to the council?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think what I'm hearing is that you'd like an opportunity to really vet them, meet them, have them say something, either in person or on Zoom, and ask questions. And so if just one extra layer of investigating on this board, I don't disagree with you that this is a very important position, and it is good to get as much information as we can.
So let me just, regarding the closing of the application period, I really don't have a big problem with that. However, you know, we're talking about now a month down the road. So if somebody submits an application who's an overqualified, satisfactory person to us, my opinion is we can't ignore that. So while the 8 people that have already applied will be prepared to talk to us then, if there's somebody that has significant qualifications, I think we would be remiss in not allowing that person to apply.
To an extent, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's only fair to the people that responded to, you know, our request and made the cutoff and were prepared, obviously, to serve. I don't think it's fair to, in fact, reopen that and therefore, you know, entertain another level of input.
My response to that would be, you can interpret that as not being fair to the applicants, but more importantly, we need to be fair to the people that we represent here and make sure that they get the best product possible. So,
I do think if we had made it clear in the application that we wanted them to speak to us, and we all knew that the applications were coming in, they were going to be voted on today, we should have made that known to the applicants before this evening's meeting.
What, that they need, that we wanted to speak with them?
Right.
Yeah, I don't agree with that necessarily. When we apply for, decide we want to run for this office, we don't know that the League of Women Voters is going to necessarily have us come before them or whatever. I think it's appropriate for the council to interview candidates for, you know, as been stated, an important position. As to the opening up to new candidates, I think if we clearly said that this is closed, I think it's closed, just like it would be for us. But I don't think there's any reason why we can't ask people to come. So we can, I mean, I don't know how to vote for these people. I see a piece of paper, I see, you know, one with a 6-page resume, one with, you know, I would like to hear and see them and get their feelings on issues.
That's not what I was,
Okay.
that's not what I'm saying. We, we gave out an application, and nowhere's on there did it say that they had to be here this evening to be voted on.
Oh, this evening, oh, yeah, no, I don't think they're being penalized for that.
But I'm just saying that
Yeah.
it was not part of
Right.
the application that they had to be here.
Right.
I know some applications are from that people do not live here, and they were willing to come back once a month for the meetings. If one of the people are on vacation, if he had known he had to be here, I'm quite sure he would have been here.
That's not good. We're not going to be penalizing anybody that's already on the list, and hopefully they can be here, and they'll have this month to know that we'd like them to come, or come on Zoom if they can't be here physically. So I think the only question we have now is, do we want to close it?
Lauren, do we need to put a motion on this?
So I think that you can vote to table this to the April agenda, but you probably need to decide if you're going to close receiving applications, just so it's clear, or leave it open. If you just table it, then I think you could continue receiving applications till it was decided.
We've already closed the application process last week, not just
Well,
this evening.
Then if you are going to move forward and be willing to accept additional applications, there could be someone in your 8 who may not be able to serve unexpectedly. So, I mean, this is completely in your discretion whether to leave the application period open or to leave it closed. So if you're going to move to table it, I think you can include in one motion to address the application period.
I mean, it seems to me we went through the application process, we closed it, they responded to what we asked for, now we're asking for a second level. So I think it's these 8 people we go back to and say, we'd like you in person to present, or through Zoom, and we set up a process between now and the first meeting in April, and basically do the election at that point in time. Because I think in Surrey, we've already closed the application process. And to be fair to the 8 people that made the deadline and said that in fact they wanted to serve, I mean, I think that's fair to them. Now we're asking for additional information, and I think that's also fair.
Well, I'm not trying to be glib, but nobody said it was going to be fair. At the end of the day, I'd like to make a motion that we table this until April and reopen the application period till the week before that April meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any additional comments?
I guess I can, I can support that under the concept of who really gets harmed if there's more candidates out there that are good. I mean, I think it's probably okay. I don't know that we'll get anybody else, but we might if, I mean, we're not going to re-advertise it, are we, or are we not, or?
Lori, how long do we advertise this for?
We can advertise it for 48 hours.
I don't,
No,
I was gonna say, no,
I mean,
not a
right now,
meeting.
how long did we advertise the opening for the planning board?
I think for this, we did for 3 weeks.
3 weeks. So, I mean, I think we gave people the opportunity over 3 weeks to apply, and if in fact they were so inclined to do it, they would have applied by this evening, or by the cutoff. So on that motion, I don't agree with opening back up. I agree with, in fact, postponing it, but not to invite in additional applicants. I think that, in fact, these 8 people, we're asking for additional information. I think it's only fair to them. Any other comments on the motion on the floor? So the motion on the floor is to, in fact, delay the election till the first meeting in April, and to ask the applicants to, in fact, be presenting that night or via Zoom, which will set up a process, and to, in fact, reopen the application process. And that's the motion on the floor, Robert? Bob?
Correct.
So all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Motion, all those opposed to that motion, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes 3-2. So we'll need to, Drew and Lori, reopen the process.
Could I just speak to the process itself that we've got going? Because this isn't the first time I've heard you say that about meeting, having folks, and we did actually have them
We've done it
last time.
before, yeah.
So I'm not really sure who actually sets up the application process. Is that done by you, town manager? I mean, the actual.
We follow the direction of the council.
Okay.
But yeah, if the council wants to hear from that, I wasn't around
Right.
the-
Oh, for the last
in
one.
any nomination or selection period when the candidates were asked to be present.
Okay. So we've done it each way, so I don't
Right.
know. So the council decides on how we'd like to do the application. So maybe next time we're having an application process, we should talk about it before we do it. That's all I'm trying to say, is moving forward so we don't stop the
So-
progress here.
Based on that motion that just passed, we're going to be doing an application process now, so let's talk about it now, so that these people have direction.
Yeah, we do need to talk about it now.
So we understand to reopen the application and to make people aware that they'll need to be at the meeting in April.
With a
Or
presentation.
Or make-
And
or a Zoom
be prepared to
presentation.
ask questions.
Right.
If they're unable to be here for whatever reason, they can attend via Zoom, and that the application period is then opened again. the people that have already applied don't have to have any concern about that. Their applications are in. But if, in fact, somebody else decides that they want to do this, then they can join the party, so to speak.
And the period would close 1 week prior to your next council meeting. Is that what I understood?
Yes, that
That's
was the
period
motion.
that we had this time. Same exact period, just 1 month later.
I think we need to put a limit on the presentation time.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. When you say presentation, I mean, that could be a wide range of things. Do you have some, maybe some like key points you'd like them to cover, like why they're interested, summarize their qualifications?
Well,
I
I'm
think their
sure-
application speaks a lot probably for itself.
I'm sure that everybody sitting up here will have their own questions for each candidate. To limit their time limits our ability to make an informed decision. So I'm not concerned about how long it's going to take to talk to each person.
Sure. I think the question, my question anyway was, what do you want them to present to you? You say have them come prepared with a presentation, and what does that mean?
They should be prepared to come here and explain their professional experience
Okay.
and what it is that they think qualifies them for this position.
Okay.
And I think that ought to be on the application now then also.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I know there are some who are here, and then certainly the 8 who
Right,
have.
there's less than half
applied.
of the applicants that are here. So it's a disadvantage to the ones that are not present.
Oh, I understand. I was just saying that way the clerk can share that information with those who aren't here so they can come prepared.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Introduction, an explanation of their qualifications, their,
Why they want to serve on the
why they
planning board.
want to serve, what their ability to serve.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, though, that I think there should be a time limit on how much time we give them to open with what their qualifications are, their background, their qualifications, and why they want to serve on the planning board. I think we should give them, otherwise they're going to not know how much to come in with. Say, you've got 5 minutes to do that, and then as long as it takes for us to ask each one questions, it takes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone's going to come in with a slideshow, and someone else is going to come in and say, well, I lived here. And
Point, yeah.
yeah, so if we say you got 5 minutes, tell us your background, your qualifications, why you want to serve on the planning board, then we ask them questions.
And it doesn't have to just be a 5-minute process for each applicant, because questions could go longer.
Exactly, it will go, yeah.
Folks don't have to present for 5 to be considered good.
Right.
It just gives us a kind of a general idea of what we're looking for.
Well, I think
It's
for direction,
flexible.
of staff, we need to lay out what we expect them to present tonight, so that in fact they can go out and open the process and tell what people are expected to do, and I agree with the timeline at opening, and if it's good 3 questions. But I think we ought to determine that now, so that in fact staff can move forward in this.
What do you think of the questions we just discussed?
Well, I think Tony gave up some good ones.
Yeah, I think if you say, tell us your background and the association with Duck, why, and then if you said, then tell us your qualifications to, why you feel you're qualified for this position, and then, what did I say for the third one? Why you want it, and why you want to do it, yeah, and why are you interested in doing it?
And you want to limit that to 5 minutes, not counting questions from council. Yeah, that's fine.
Pardon?
I'm good with that.
And then the council would be unlimited in their time to ask questions and make further inquiry.
Correct.
And addressing their availability, some of them are from out of town. Is that okay for everyone, or do you think that just goes without saying that they're going to be available?
I'm okay if they have to be there by Zoom for some reason. It would be easier and better if they could
No,
be
I
here.
mean, like in their presentation, their ability to be here.
Oh, yeah.
Present planning board.
I think if they're willing to serve on the planning board, that they should be here in person. It's a commitment for 12 times a year, and for those 12 times, they should be here. If they're thinking about coming on board, they should be here to speak to us, not on Zoom.
Oh, well, are you
Well, the motion that was voted and approved was that they could appear in person or appear by Zoom. So that motion's already been approved tonight. But in terms of your future concern for planning board members to actually be physically present for meetings, that's certainly something you can question the applicants about at the next meeting. But as far as interviewing the applicants, that motion's already been made and voted on tonight. If you want to change that, you'd have to do a vote in the alternative and start over.
If you want to, go right ahead, Sandy.
I'd like to make an amendment to Rob's, that the applicant is here in person to be interviewed.
So I don't think it's an amendment. I think you'd have to just make a new motion, and it's a motion to require the applicants to attend in person for interview.
I'd like to make a motion that the applicant attends the meeting in person so they can be interviewed by the town council.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
No, I said aye. I
Oh, I'm
didn't
sorry.
think they needed to be in person. Yeah, but that's okay, 4 to 1.
4 to 1.
It passes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was slow on my negative.
All right, let me go back to our town manager. Do you have enough information to move forward with the reapplication process?
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion on that item? All right, let's go on to new business, discussion, consideration of completing the purchase of a property located at 145 Buffalo Head Road for governmental use related to beach nourishment, beach maintenance, and public safety. Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give Kay just a minute to get that presentation up. I just have some slides just to frame the conversation a little bit, and Mr. Shiano's going to take a little break, so please give us just a minute. Would you like me to wait for him to return, sir?
Yeah.
So this new business item is to consider the completion of the purchase of a property at 145 Buffalo Head Road. Council has discussed this in the past as we began the negotiation for it. I just want to give a little bit of history to bring everybody up to speed on where this all came from. So the town staff became aware of an oceanfront home on the market in December. Property is at 145 Buffalo Head Road, which is between Pintail and Widgeon in the Carolina Dunes neighborhood. This is located within the beach nourishment project area. That red arrow shows where the property is, so it's about 1/3 of the way north if you're coming from the south. The staff evaluated this particular location's potential to resolve what is a long-term need for access to the beach for beach nourishment. Council is aware of the efforts that staff has made to try to get onto the beach for nourishment construction activity. Council is aware that this year access, or would have been last year, now it's going to be this year, access is in Southern Shores. That access is not assured and likely actually not to happen anytime in the future. So we've been very active in pursuing access via easement in neighborhoods, and we've repeatedly gotten no thank you. They all understand the necessity of doing nourishment, but just weren't willing to provide access easement, and council's aware of those conversations. So we see this as an opportunity to provide long-term resolution to that, so the contractors can actually get to the beach to perform this construction activity, and that is, as you're aware, about a 5-year cycle that nourishment occurs. The roadways in Carolina Dunes that would be used to access this property are maintained and owned by the state of North Carolina, so NCDOT roadways. The lot is 75 feet wide. It's sufficient width to allow for access for the equipment and for the temporary staging of equipment and materials. As noted here on the slide, nourishment happens every 5 years. So during the nourishment construction process, 6 to 8 weeks or so, there would be a fairly significant amount of activity on the parcel. So we wouldn't in any way sugarcoat that. There will be equipment that will be moved from the street over the dune onto the beach, and then it will be removed once the construction is over with. During the construction process, light vehicles would go back and forth onto the beach, and those are primarily pickup trucks for the construction company themselves and our engineers and other folks that are working on the project. There's service for the porta potties that have to be used on the beach. There's fuel trucks that need to access to refuel the equipment that's used in the construction. And again, that window runs 6 to 8 weeks for the actual construction. The parcel is currently developed. A single-family dwelling is shown here in this picture, built in 1984, containing about 2,400 square feet on 2 levels. We did present this information, or this suggestion to the council, or opportunity rather, in a closed session in January, on January 4th of 2023. And then the council gave direction to myself and our attorney regarding negotiation for the purchase of this property. We did negotiate a purchase price of $1.6 million that was accepted by the owners on January 20th. The planned closing is within 60 days, and there's a 45-day due diligence period built into this purchase agreement, and that due diligence period ends on the 6th of March. As discussed with the council, the property would be restricted to government use, so it's for beach nourishment, it's for beach maintenance. That would include grading of the beach access ways in the nourishment area and others, and then also for public safety, so that's our lifeguards, fire, EMS, and police. The plan currently is to have no structures on the site following the removal of this house. After the 2023 rental season, as council was made aware, the North Carolina law requires that we honor any current rental agreements on the property, and the intent would be to continue to take rental agreements for the summer of 2023 season. There would be no permanent or long-term storage of vehicle or materials on this site, so only that's what's directly related to beach nourishment, beach maintenance. This would not be a storage yard for anything that belongs to the town or our contractors. The driveway would be retained and would be repaired as necessary. We have no plans to expand any area that's currently paved. It's concrete mostly right now. The plan that we've discussed would call for a bar gate or some sort of a cable or chain to restrict access to the driveway. We would maintain the lot in as much of a natural state as we could. You're trying to kind of in character with the neighborhood. We certainly wouldn't want to disturb any of the beach grass on the dunes or any growth that's on the dunes. We will not modify the dune height other than what's required to do beach nourishment. So occasionally, the dune height and profile will need to be modified to allow for the heavier equipment to get out onto the beach. That would have to be permitted as part of our beach nourishment permit application through CAMA, and CAMA would require, and we would actually require that the dune be put back to its original profile following nourishment. The funding for this would come from beach nourishment reserves. The only reason that we brought this idea to council is we need to get on the beach for beach nourishment. Absent that very real need, we wouldn't have even been discussing this with you. So it's required, we need to get on the beach in order to nourish it. So it's a legitimate expense from beach nourishment reserve funds. We do have some restrictions on those funds, one of which is our bond covenants that require that we have a balance of the greater of $1 million or the amount of MSD tax collected. That has to be in our reserve fund, physically in that reserve fund as of December 1st of each year. After this purchase, it looks like on our projection, conservative projection is we'll have about $1.5 million in that fund as of December 1st of 2023. So we would remain in compliance with bond covenants. So what we're looking for from council tonight is if you desire to continue to make this purchase, approve a budget amendment to fund the purchase, which is to move money from the Beach Nourishment Reserve to the general fund so we can make the payment for the property. And then if you desire to approve the purchase, make a motion to do that. There's also consideration of an ordinance that you have in front of you. I think you'll probably want to hold that a little bit, and your attorney might give you a little bit of advice on that. But those are the three items of consideration. I'm happy to answer any question the council has about it.
Drew, just for clarification, now, obviously, beach nourishment has been delayed into this year. And if, in fact, Southern Shores had not required additional sand, would we have been shut out getting to the beach and that we had no access to the beach? So we couldn't get in through the Sandaling or Sound to Sea or the Fed and the opportunity at Port Trinidad. So if, in fact, Southern Shores did not need additional sand, we would have been shut out getting to the beach, which would have been disastrous.
That's what has been relayed to me. So because Southern Shores is extending their project, they're getting a little more sand put on their civic association, because Southern Shores, like Duck, does not have any public beach access. So their civic association owns those accesses, and they're allowing Southern Shores to go back on at Hillcrest to do nourishment. And as part of that, because they had already agreed to allow us on there, because they're going to be moving equipment, they're allowing the dock construction operation to mobilize and demobilize through the Hillcrest access. We do have a temporary easement in Port Trinity. So on the very south end of that development, there's a small access way that the contractor will be able to use for light vehicles, and that's where they'll likely access to get their personnel on and off the beach, and if it's close enough to be able to run a hose to refuel their vehicles. But absent the Southern Shores access, not necessarily I guess if you include our contractor, because they delayed, one of the conditions that the council approved as part of that delay was we put the responsibility to get on the beach on them. And they were able to renegotiate using the relationships with Southern Shores and with Dare County to be able to renegotiate with the Civic Association to get access. But, yeah.
Do we also have an obligation to maintain the beach once we've nourished it? And then the fact that we use public funds, don't we in fact have an obligation to maintain?
I'm not aware of any statutory obligation. The council at any time could say that we're going to get out of the beach nourishment business. obviously there's revenue that's tied directly to that, and then if the council says we're just done doing beach nourishment, we'd have to figure out and I'm sure there's ways that gets done to get the money back to the people that contributed those funds.
I have a question about the, using the MSD funds for the purchase of the property. You're saying that we have to have, that the bond holders have a particular requirement, minimum requirement. Are there any other, have you discussed this with the county and other, everybody involved, the local government commission, everybody's saying, is this an appropriate use of the MSD funds?
It is, yes. And because of the way that the language that created the MSDs, it says for beach nourishment. Getting onto the beach, access to the beach is part of that process. And we're paying for access to the beach now, and through the mobilization and demobilization, and obviously we're paying. Duck pays a little more per cubic yard, and that's a factor driven by not only the distance from the borrow area, so how far the dredge needs to move over the ocean, but also a factor of how far they have to drive their equipment and material up the beach. So everything that comes on the beach to do nourishment is going to have to travel the entire length of the beach from Hillcrest to the nourishment area, which is just north of the FRF property.
And on the, I think the biggest, besides some other points that we are hearing from Carolina Dunes, some of which I find, well, what I want to get to is the idea that when we place a restriction on the use of this property, if we do go forward with the purchase, that it's, I think the concern is that can be changed at any time or challenged. And is that, I guess, I don't know if it's a question for you, town manager, or for us as a council, to be fully aware of that and what we can do to protect the integrity of what we're trying to do here.
Right, and your attorneys will give you more guidance on that. The draft ordinance that you have in front of you is, the council can adopt an ordinance, and it's correct to say that a future council could unadopt or change that ordinance. The way that this ordinance is structured is, right now the council can adopt an ordinance and requires no notice, requires no public hearing. The way that we've structured this particular draft ordinance, it would require mailed notice to adjacent property owners, posting on the property, and publication in the newspaper, very much like we see with land use type decisions that are required to go through public hearing process. So we've encumbered the process by requiring public hearing, but it's still true that even through that process, then the council could, a future council could say, we want to change those restrictions. I don't know why a council would want to make changes in that in terms of allowing other than governmental access. We don't have any public beach access now, yet not all the neighborhoods, all but a couple of the neighborhoods in Duck actually have access. So the people that live here, the people that come and visit and rent properties in Duck have access to the beach. So there's really no compelling reason to create public access, especially in a neighborhood like this. And I would never stand up here and recommend to the council that happen. And I don't know, I've talked to a number of folks that live in the town, and I don't really know of anybody that's all that excited about having public access anywhere.
Drew, I'd like to, ask some questions and make some comments, if that's okay. First of all, I think I would like to say that I know personally, I can say it, and I believe I can speak on behalf of the council, that we are understanding and sympathetic with the concerns that the people in that area have about this project. And we have talked about them, and I think it's our sincere desire that we want to address those to everybody's satisfaction, and I think we can do that. I would say that. The other thing I want to say, and I maybe have no business saying this, but I'm the new guy on the block here, but I think to say, you know, that we didn't want to communicate, or we did this in the dark, or we were not being transparent is not really fair to us, because it would not, first of all, it's within our purview to do that. And second of all, it wouldn't have been a smart decision to announce to someone, you know, weeks before you're planning to buy a piece of property that you're going to buy a piece of property. That would start a bidding war, more than likely, on that property. So I think we tried to do it in a way that protected the town and our fiscal, you know, situation. The other thing I would say is, you know, our objective here is to secure control of our future as a town in terms of what we may need to do to maintain our beaches, our public safety, and our beach maintenance if, in fact, we lose other accesses. Being that there are not very many properties, you know, that come available, we don't have a lot of options. And I think we saw this as an option that came available. If we miss it, who knows if another one would come again. Okay, with that, I think we checked into it legally, and public property can be owned by governmental entities but not be open to the general use by the public.
That's correct.
Correct, to our attorney?
That's correct.
So, you know, we can deny the public from using this property. So there is no, it can't be challenged. I mean, anybody can challenge anything, but I mean, legally, we can withstand that challenge. Second of all, I don't know anybody on this council that's interested in creating public beach access or in the town. But I do think that in the future, who knows what could happen, and I'm sympathetic with the concern that a council 10 years down the road could say, we want to open this up to public access because we just think the world is free, and if our borders are open, so should our beaches be open. Anything can happen in 10 years, despite the fact that we don't think it will. So my concern would be making something included or in addition to or on top of this that ensures that for in perpetuity, this is the only purpose that this could be used for. That would be what I would suggest that we look at here. There is no parking on state roads, is my understanding. Am I correct on that?
We have an ordinance, yes.
So there's still nobody can park there. We could ensure that we won't let anybody park on our property, or that we park anything on the property on a regular basis. You talked about the financing of it. We're not going to put any structures on it. The other comment I would have is that when I look at the concrete driveway, we're going to maintain it. If everybody in the neighborhood or whatever agreed that aesthetically it would be better to not have a concrete driveway there, would we be willing to take it out, make it au naturel, and then when the time comes for a pathway that's needed, we could put matting down or something, do what we got to do for the dune, and then when we're done, pull it out, restore it to, you know, as natural as possible or whatever. I guess what I'm trying to say is I want it to look as good as possible so the people who live there feel comfortable with it.
Right. Yeah, and
I mean, if there wasn't concrete there, we wouldn't put it down, probably.
correct.
So either way, we could go either way with that, maybe. Okay. That would be my comments on it.
And I will say that in terms of government restricting use of property, there are two pretty clear examples in Dock. One is the FRF is a pretty clear example of it, and that's federal government.
Right.
And then the county owns a water tower here, and that's not open to public use or anything. So and I think your attorneys probably talked to you. It was probably the meeting I missed when you got advice from your attorney, but there are precedent for that, and Ms. Womble can address that if you'd like to.
While we're on the topic of public beach accesses, it is in our vision, in our plans, that we would pursue public beach accesses if they were available. And historically, one of the reasons we did that was because of the FRF property. That property, when we became a town, we zoned it conservation property, again, so that it wouldn't be sort of sold and then just like developed into a bunch of homes. We made it like park-like. But, you know, if the FRF ever left that property, or, you know, which was, again, this was, you know, many years ago, but that would be something that we could pursue and have as an access. I think that public access, or let me just say, ability for all residential owners in Duck to have access to the beach is something that would be good to have. As you mentioned just a few minutes ago, there are streets in Duck that do not have deeded beach access. We've just worked it through all these years, before we were a town and after. Nothing really changed in that regard because they're all privately owned properties. And as we've grown and developed and it's become more of a topic, that's something that, you know, I'd like communities to work through and maybe facilitated by the town. But I did want to address the fact that it is written that we would pursue public beach access. That's right, and it was because of the FRF property or any subdivision that might want to make a public beach access, but that would of course be up to them because it's private property.
Well, then I'll clarify my statement, because I don't think I spoke fully on behalf of the whole council. Speaking on behalf of myself, I would not pursue public beach access in the town of Duck. If the FRF facility became available and the town were to buy it and wanted to provide public access for residents of the town of Duck, I would be in favor of that. Residents of the town of Duck, or renters.
I think that what Monica just said, putting that property at the FRF in some sort of conservancy, I think that it's up to Ms. Womble and Mr.
We did it.
Well, no, but what I'm talking about now is this particular piece of property that we're talking about either creates some sort of conservancy around that, or some irrevocable trust that holds that piece of property owned by the town, and in the language there prevents anybody from ever changing that, including a future council.
So, and I'll give you some comment. I did staff with Robert about this agenda before he had to be gone tonight. You have the proposed ordinance in front of you. As you know from the presentation, that the structure is going to remain on that property, and it's going to be continued to be leased at least for the through 2023, which means for the 2023 calendar year, I believe at this point, to the calendar year, is that right? Correct. Okay. That structure is going to remain on the property. That property is going to be for residential use. And so you have this ordinance before you tonight for consideration. I believe the staff's presentation's just a little bit different than the packet that I have. It says that it is there for you to consider, to adopt, and or provide additional instruction for amendments. So you have the ability and the time to consider further avenues that may be satisfactory to address your concerns, address some of the concerns you may have heard tonight. So you have the option to move forward with that, or you have the option to provide some further insight, some further instruction for staff, and certainly to council. And I will relay those to Robert, and he will work diligently to address those concerns and try to meet all those concerns for you. So you are not required to adopt that tonight. You have time to make further considerations if you desire.
And that, if you're looking for a recommendation from staff on that, that's our recommendation, is that we hold on that, and there's this avenue, and there are some others that your attorney will be discussing with you that are likely to address a lot of the concerns, including some of the things that Mr. Mooney mentioned.
Any other questions? Or-
Not now.
Well, I'd like to start by making a motion that we basically approve the budget amendment to fund the purchase by moving funds from the Beach Nourishment Fund to the general fund. And that's open for discussion.
In terms of timing, I do know that we have the due diligence period that expires March 6th, and then we have 45 days after to close. Is that, I mean, that's the timeline.
That's the timeline in the contract. Certainly, as you all are aware, sometimes those timelines have to adjust depending on a variable of items, inspections, or just funding sources, things like that. There's a number of things that can affect that closing date. So that's the projected closing date right now. You'll note the second motion to approve and give the town manager and the attorney the authority to move forward. It's asking for discretion for non-substantive changes. That's an example of a non-substantive change, which is the closing date, which may need to flex just based on real estate practices. So I don't know if that answers your question.
And this is really a logical first step because we need to make sure the funds are there. Any further questions or discussion on the motion on the budget amendment? I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion posted 5-0. I'd like to make a second motion to approve the purchase contract for 145 Buffalo Head Road as set forth in the agenda, and to authorize the town manager in his discretion to consider and approve any non-substantial changes to the contract, including but not limited to changes to dates and time periods, and to authorize the town attorney to close the town's purchase of the property. And this motion, I think, just addresses what our town attorney was advising us right now. So we've got a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion on the floor?
Well, I think if we approve this motion, that there's a leap of faith that the community has that we can address the third situation, which is how we restrict the use
Right.
of this property. You know, we've heard from some residents that there's a significant property owner distrust of the town. That kind of cuts me pretty hard. I'm going to say it right here, but, and I have heard it before, but I don't understand it, and I welcome anybody to call me and talk to me personally about your distrust. Serving on this council as long as I have, you know, we're all a little different, but I think we are all very similar in our love for this community and this town, and we have worked very hard on the behalf to save Carolina Dunes and that whole northern beach. As you know, what it looked like before we did the Nourishment Project. But anyway, I just wanted to make that. I think there is a lot of room for discussion in terms of how this can be locked down. I do agree with what others have talked about in terms of restricting the use of this, and I think it is important and not taken lightly. So I'll just say that.
Any other discussion on the motion on the floor?
I totally concur with Monica, and I think that's our objective, is to make sure that the interests are protected to the fullest extent possible. However, we can't risk losing the deal that we have. I think if, you know, it would be nice if we can come to that agreement before the deal closes, but it may not happen, and I think we still have to close the deal, and our constituents are going to have to trust that we're here representing their best interest. So that's all I have to say.
Vice Chair Attorney, we've got time to work through that.
Yep.
This is just a draft note ordinance in there for information and consideration.
Just to clarify too, if this were to go through and that rental house is on the property, we continue to work through the property manager that's assigned, and the liability for the town isn't anything that we have to be concerned about as property owners of rental property.
So that's a question I posed to our insurance company, and they said, you're covered, other than we need to add the physical damage coverage. So we'll need to add the property to our schedule of insurance for fire purposes. But for liability purposes, once the town owns it, it's covered. We have a very broad blanket that covers anything we own
Thank you for
in terms of
clarifying that.
liability.
Thank you.
Any other conversation or discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 5-0. And I think upon recommendation of both the town manager and town attorney, any further discussion on ordinance 23-04 will start to take place from this point forward.
That's right, and I believe that that was developed by staff based on comments from the council to show the concern and how serious this, those concerns raised to the council are, and they'll continue to work through that and try to finalize.
Thank you, Drew. Going on to item number 8B, discussion consideration of amendment to the contract between the town of Duck and Sandski LLC doing business as Surf Rescue to provide additional funding to provide competitive wages for surf rescue personnel. Drew?
I'm sorry, Kay, probably didn't tell you this. I have all my slides are in one deck. Sorry about that. So, Council, you heard at your retreat from Merrick Dabrowski about some issues regarding compensation, particularly for lifeguards, and this is a follow-up to that. There's a little bit of urgency in this discussion, mainly because he's right now trying to recruit lifeguards for this season, and he's up against some competition. So the action that we're looking for tonight is a discussion and consideration of approving an amendment to the contract with, between the town of Duck and Sandski LLC, and that's the LLC that the Duck Surf Rescue operates under. That contract was executed in 2019. And then also, we want to provide, the contract amendment will allow us to provide additional compensation so he can offer competitive wages for his staff for the year. And, okay, it's advancing on the computer, but not on the screen. I'm just going to keep talking. And we'll catch up. So this is a 5-year contract that was executed in 2019. I'm sorry, give me a minute. We'll get it. We'll get it done. The Seaback store looks great. All right, I'll just go through this. You've all seen that. We don't need to see that again. All right. So, 5-year contract. These are the escalators that are built into the contract. So these are the contract amounts you see in the upper left. As Merrick described to you, and as probably comes as no surprise to you, so there's some unforeseen economic pressures at work here. It's important to know that last year, so that our lifeguards are paid $15 an hour, as were all the other towns along the beach, including the National Park Service. Currently, everyone is advertised for, well, not everyone, most have advertised for $18 an hour. The National Park Service has advertised at $17.99 an hour. Yes, ma'am.
I just, after you finish.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Are we at the end of this, are we in fiscal '24 on this slide, as he told us?
So we are in fiscal '23,
We are.
yes.
He was saying it was our last year, so I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yep, he misspoke, so yeah, there's one more year. What he's requesting is he wants to increase the wages of all of his lifeguards by $3 an hour. It doesn't impact, so what you do doesn't impact the wages being paid by Sandski LLC to lifeguards serving other communities. So he has contracts for both the town of Southern Shores and the National Park Service. The National Park Service has approved the increase, so the federal government moved really quick on that to go to $17.99 an hour. There's action pending in Southern Shores. They'll need to have the same conversation. The numbers that are on the table to the right were provided by Merrick. So he divided out his season and showed what the impact of $3 an hour is. So for the remainder of this fiscal year, it's about $30,000 is what he's asking for. But the total cost, if you look at the total cost of the summer, and he thinks in terms of summer and we think in terms of fiscal year, mainly because we have to by state statute. So things get a little bit confusing, but for the summer of 2023, the impact to him is $72,972 to increase the wages. He's asking for $60,000 of that, is essentially what this request is for the summer of 2023. And then the way he has to do his work, again, because his fiscal year is different than ours, he's asking for another $30,000 to cover the beginning of summer of 2024. What that means to us is he's looking for an additional $30,000 in our fiscal 23, so right now. And he's asking for an additional $60,000 to be included in a contract amendment for fiscal 24. So when we write the draft budget for fiscal 24, if you all approve the contract amendment, we would include that change. So what that does in fiscal 23, the number you saw earlier was $548,000, add 30 is $578 in fiscal 23, and then in fiscal 24 it goes from $566 to $626, and that's his ask. In order, if the council wants to do this, you need to approve a budget amendment for the current fiscal year only. So for fiscal 23, that'll be in the amount of $30,000, and that's in your packet. And then you would need to approve the contract amendment that's also shown in your packet. And that's all I have. I'll answer any questions you have. Mr. Dabrowski will be back in town at the end of this week. And, I suggested that maybe he want to come and visit with the council because I know there's some lingering questions about deployment and, kind of the accountability in the contract about the money that Duck spends actually going to the hours on the beach in Duck. And I think that might be a good conversation to have at your April mid-month meeting when you can sit down in more of a workshop setting with him. The most pressing really is, do you want to keep us competitive, or not us, keep him competitive in the lifeguard market for this summer? And that's why we were in such a hurry to get this to you to this meeting.
I think we are.
Go ahead, Sandy.
I want to stay competitive with the rest of the towns, but the deployment, he's got to live, he doesn't use our people in Southern Shores, but his last stand in Duck is at the Southern Shores line, and that just bothers me. And when I see his four-wheelers going past Tuckahoe, and it takes him an hour to come back to go 3 blocks, I have a problem with it. And it doesn't feel that money, our money is being spent all in Duck. If they maybe move that, spread his stands going north more, I might not have this problem, but when his last stand is at the town line, you know, it bothers me.
And I think, and that's, the suggestion I would have is to have him come. I can't talk to his deployment. I can't talk to, because I'm not, I don't do his scheduling and stuff. So it would be really good for him to hear these concerns in a public setting from you all and be able to provide you accurate information about that. It's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, I'm not asking him to jeopardize the safety of the people in Duck or Southern Shores, but if we're paying for it, let's keep it in Duck.
Yes, sir.
So could I make a motion that we approve the budget amendment as proposed to add an additional $30,000 for the contract in this current fiscal year?
Can I just ask one question here, Monica? I think it was 3 years ago, we gave him $10,000 a year for this contract to get J1 students from South America. Where did that 10,000 go? Because we don't have any of those students or lifeguards here.
I don't know that we gave him $10,000 a year, but we did give him that $10,000 that first year, and then he told us, I think, when we asked him that he spent it.
Use it for,
Use it to keep salaries competitive is what he told you at a prior meeting. All right. Yeah.
correct, but that's $40,000 to give him, not 30.
Yeah, I kind of think we should support him from a standpoint of hiring the guards now. But I would certainly like to see a longer discussion about the future on the beach and how he's deploying. And I agree with Sandy. I mean, for the same reason the county won't put an ambulance on the north end of Duck, why would we put a stand on the south end of our beach? And I think we need to have that conversation, where the stands are and how many we need. And, I think we need to do a little more fine tuning on the contract for next year before we guarantee that contract. I think we do need a sit down with Merrick. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I mean, I think we need to
I
give them
would
the help
like that,
to
too.
get
I
the
mean-
guides, the guards, obviously.
I think, certainly I think we can, at the mid-month meeting in April, we can certainly get Merrick in here and discuss all of the things, all the concerns that people have about deployment and his resources. But we need to do this now, or we won't have any lifeguards to talk about. And my own opinion is we should go maybe even a little bit more than that, just to prevent future hiccups that are probably going to happen. Additionally, we want to be able to attract the most qualified people that we can. It's like anything else. I mean, we had an evaluation. We heard about our volunteers in the town. Their time is valued at about almost $30 an hour. And meanwhile, we're paying people that are legitimately saving lives half of that. I'm not the right person to ask that, because I've always argued that the police don't get paid as much as they ought to, but it's the same thing. And we need to have these people to protect not only our residents, but everybody that comes here in the summertime. And so, for what it's worth, my thought is to even go a little bit higher.
So I'm just using this, you're saying that we should go and then have the people, then have the other towns start a war with us.
Let them do whatever they want.
But
I have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the motion is, if we're going to talk about how much money these people are going to be paid per hour, that motion may be a higher number, may include a higher number. That's the only reason I'm saying that.
No.
But I think Merrick presented at the retreat. This is what I need to get the guards. I can get the guards at $18 an hour.
I don't disagree with you, but we only have the one number. We can't create a new number from Eric, I don't think.
And that's a
Yeah.
20% increase in the rate.
Yeah, I think he told us that he was confident that he could do the job at the $18. And I think since everybody else is at $18 and everybody else was at 15 and it worked, I think we're just laggards here on the 18. I think if we go to the 18, I think we'll be okay. If it turns out we're not, then we can make an adjustment. But I think we'll be okay with the 18. We'll be in line with everybody else.
So the motion on the floor is to amend the budget for this fiscal year. And it sounds like we're going to, in fact, delay the conversation on the contract until we have a sit-down with American going forward.
Can we do that?
Why can't we?
So the,
I would like to do.
Why can't we?
So I think you're going to vote on the budget amendment, and then and that's to move the money, then you'd have to vote on the contract amendment
to spend the money.
to spend the money, and then additional contract concerns for the next year, he would come to another meeting, is what I understand.
Yes, so it's more for deployment. So you're approving, if you're considering approving a budget amendment for fiscal '23, that will cover him until June 30th. So you would then amend the contract for fiscal '23. If you want him to continue to pay $18 an hour for the rest of this summer, then you would need to amend the amount as shown here for fiscal '24. And I will tell you, you can amend that contract, and the contract is subject to appropriation. So the control then is during the budget process. If the council does not appropriate, then we then would get out of that contract. We would need to find another way for the provision of the service. But that's always an option. If you don't appropriate, the contract goes away, basically.
Yeah, but that appropriation has got to be through some discussion with, Ocean Rescue. And before I jump into next year, I'd like to have more of a conversation with American.
Right, so that's...
Maybe he's got too many stands, maybe we got them for too long, maybe they're in the wrong locations. We haven't had that discussion and debate in a couple of years.
And I think, I'm sorry, Mr.
Go ahead.
For clarification, so that mid-month meeting in April is when we'll be presenting the first draft of something that looks like a budget. It's not really, because it's not balanced, and that would be a great time for him to come here and have that conversation if that's the council's desire. And I'm hearing that it is, so we'll invite him to come to that.
Yeah, but I just want one question, if anybody knows. In his contract, does it say that the deployment and the use of resources are based solely on his discretion?
There's the contract calls for a set number of stands, and it breaks it down by the time of the year. So a certain number of stands in the beginning of the year. Well, actually starts with roving patrol. So it says exactly how many. It doesn't specify in the contract the where. So,
Well, no, but my question is, who gets to make that decision? Is it in his contract that the discretion is completely his? That's my question. Because if it is, and we're going to have a conversation with him in mid-April, if he's already got a contract that says he can do whatever he wants to do, then we have a problem.
I'm not sure of the wording, Mr. Mooney, but I know that he's been very amenable to
Yeah, I can't imagine he's going to
conversation.
buck it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine he's going to buck the
And
suggestions.
if the council says, we would rather not have a stand all the way at the southern end of town, and we want to move it a little bit, and then I would rely on him to say where that resource then should be allocated, because he's the one out on the beach. He knows the levels of crowds and the people that are being protected. He knows the way the ocean acts in these areas, and I'm sure it's the volume of people and the ocean condition that really kind of sets where he wants to put his stands, and he wants them to be a certain distance apart there so they can see one another, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not the one to answer that. I rely on him and his years of expertise in doing this, and I think it's really good questions for you to address with Mr. Dabrowski.
Well, I'd like to see him come back and address that, because I'd like to see volumes by the various beaches, and I'd also like to see ocean rescues that we've had to do. I mean, do we have a lot or little in this particular area, or do we have any?
And I'm sure
I would
we
like
can ask him to
come
bring
back and
his,
give us a little bit more in the way of statistics of what he's doing.
we can ask him to bring his, so the retreat presentation he did had some of that data. We can ask him to bring that back in April as well.
He did address it. So just to clarify, I have a motion to approve the money for this fiscal year for $30,000. And then what we could also do is have approved, if you're saying we have to approve the contract amendment in order to affect this, so I would add that to my motion, stipulating that we wouldn't,
So I would do one motion at a time. So I think you need to vote on the budget amendment first, and then make a vote as to the contract amendment being, you're either going to approve the contract amendment for fiscal year 2023 only, or for both. But
okay, so let's just table that, and thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure if they all had to be tied together.
Well, let me ask a question. We're authorizing him $30,000.
It only gets
We're not
us
really
13.
authorizing a pay level. He says he needs $18 a guard, an hour to get guards. So he needs $30,000 to do that. That's what we're authorizing. We're not really authorizing individual pay,
Right.
correct?
Right, we don't get down into the level of that, and if the council wants to audit his records, his payroll records, we can, you can direct me to do that. I don't believe he, as a private corporation, I don't think he really wants to put that out in public, but he would certainly allow me and Jessica to audit those.
But he says he needs $30,000 more to get his guards. So we give him the $30,000. He may pay one guard 17 and one 19. I mean, based upon experience, based upon their ability. I mean,
Well, that's why we've always given them that latitude with
Yeah, right,
this
exactly.
contract. I'm a little hung up in that the 30 only gets us to the end of June, and
Yeah,
that's where that's where I'm at a hard stop.
Does his contract spans 2 fiscal years with us, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, his
So,
summer does.
pardon?
His summer really spans 2 years, and that's where it really gets, and I apologize for the confusion. So his season goes over, so you can see it up here, so it does cover 2 fiscal years. So May to June, and then July through October. So May to June is 1 fiscal year, July to October is in a completely different fiscal year. Our contract and our payments to him are on fiscal year, not on season. So that, it does get confusing. So the only real budget amendment we need is $30,000 for this fiscal year. We're not talking about a budget amendment for fiscal '24 because that budget hasn't been adopted. So, we really do need to amend then the contract to show these numbers for fiscal '23, '24, and '24. And then it's subject to appropriation. So during the budget process, the council can say, we're just not happy with this. We want to reduce that amount of appropriation. And if he says, no, I'm not going to sign a contract amendment to reduce it, then the council can make a decision on what you want to do in terms of a vendor or a contractor to provide the service.
I mean, I just don't want to make a commitment into the future without having at least a discussion and also looking at perhaps trade-offs.
Well, I'm just looking at this contract now. In paragraph C, it absolutely says that the locations will be agreed to between the contractor and the town. So the language is already there.
So we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good with that.
Bless you.
Monica, do you want to amend your motion from $18 an hour to the amendment for $30,000?
I already made the motion just for 30. I didn't say
her motion is just to approve the budget amendment for the $30,000 for fiscal year 2023.
So we got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion then?
None?
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
I'd like to make a second motion to approve a contract amendment with Sand and Sea.
Sandski LLC.
Sandski
Yeah.
LLC for the additional, I guess the contract amendment would include the pricing. Do I have that amendment?
So I think you can make a motion to approve the contract amendment as presented by staff for the fiscal year 23 and 24. 24 is subject to appropriation.
If you wouldn't mind putting in that motion, it's the third amendment to the contract between the town of Buck and Sandski LLC, and that's what's in your packet.
Third amendment. Okay, thank you. I'd like to make clear my motion that we are approving a third amendment to surf rescue contract between the town of Duck and Sandski LLC, subject to appropriation and a discussion with him in mid-April.
And I guess if you would
Not
just, go
subject to, but
and if we could just add on to that and authorize the manager to sign the contract. I think you probably want that on there, Ms. Wamel.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I thought that was implicit, but yes, you would authorize staff to execute that amendment.
and authorize staff to execute the third amendment as presented.
Do we need 2024 in there anywhere?
She already did. She said for 2023 and 2024, and the contract amendment presented by staff includes both, but tonight you have appropriated for the fiscal year 2023. You have not appropriated for fiscal year 2024, and so I believe that your appropriation for fiscal year 2024 will be considered through the budget process and certainly in consideration with the meeting that you're going to, discussion for the mid-month April meeting.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion on the floor? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
We beat that one to death.
Continuing on new business, discussion consideration of authorizing a public hearing on ordinance 23-01, a proposed text amendment amending the definition of lot coverage in section 156.002 of the zoning ordinance to permit alternative ground cover materials such as pervious pavers, artificial turf, and other services.
Thank you, Mayor Kingston. We have before you tonight is, as the mayor summarized, a copy or an ordinance proposal to amend one definition in the zoning ordinance for lot coverage. There are two purposes for this. The first is it would make it clear what alternative type of solutions the town will permit that would not be classified as light coverage. In other words, we wouldn't count those things toward light coverage when we're doing calculations. The second thing is just a smaller thing that just identifies, you can see it on the first page of the ordinance. It just clarifies that when we include septic systems, we're talking about any innovative system, not just a peat system. So while we're dealing with this ordinance, we thought it good to clarify that. So the issue we've had is that we've seen more and more instances as staff of property owners wanting to come in with things like permeable pavers or artificial turf has really been a big one. And we're just looking to clarify how to best deal with those things going forward. So we've had several meetings with the planning board where they discussed different options. The last one was their February meeting. We've included some of the background information in this month's packet to give you an idea of what some other communities are doing. And at their meeting on February the 8th, the planning board had a good discussion where they looked at this ordinance as well as another related ordinance that is not before you tonight that deals with the specific standards that people would be able to use if they were seeking the additional 5% light coverage. for residential to go from 30 to 35%. The board felt that that needed a little bit of further discussion, so they did not move that forward tonight. So there'll be more details on that, but they did ask for the council's consideration of the proposed text amendment to the definition for lot coverage. So you received in your package a copy of an ordinance. You were subsequently sent a copy of a proposed ordinance that includes 3 additional words. They were proposed by our chairman, Mr. Cofield, who's with us tonight. Those are highlighted in that version that you should have all received yesterday. Our thanks to Lori Ackerman for getting that out in a timely manner. Anyway, he has asked just for clarification, because this is an item that was discussed by the board at the meeting, that the definition include owner certification of compliance with the standards that the manufacturer has if they're using a permeable surface, that the owner is certifying that they have complied with that. And again, the staff will have already required some documentation of that as part of it, but the board has additionally discussed owner certification. So Mr. Cofield is here he can provide you with any more details if you need those. But we're asking for your consideration of that as part of the ordinance. So that being said, the board did discuss this at their meeting, as I mentioned, on February 8th, and voted unanimously to recommend approval. We're asking you tonight to set a public hearing. Since this is a text amendment, we have that additional step as a legislative process. So we're asking you to set a hearing for your meeting in April, and there is a suggested motion in your packet. I'd be glad to answer any questions the board members might have.
I have one, Joe.
Yes, sir.
This, the 3-word changes in here, has that gone out to all the planning board members?
Yes, sir.
And they've all agreed to it?
We have not received any response from planning board members. It was sent out, Lori, within an hour, almost immediately after it was sent to you.
Okay,
So
there was no discussion on this from the planning board, a group discussion.
there was. Now, the board is going to get into that issue in defining that further at their meeting next week. They're going to talk about the specifics of what that means, owner certification, but the board members as a whole did not. They were sent this, but we have no comments from them.
Okay, do you think that maybe that this ought to go back to the planning board to look at their meeting next week before we put it on the docket for next month?
That's certainly something we could do. There's no problem with that at all. There's no particular urgency to this, and we'd be glad to do that if that's the direction of the council.
That would be a direction I'd like to see it go.
Okay.
I think that would help me as well, just making sure there's unanimity still, and probably is, but if you haven't heard back from anybody, it's a little unusual to kind of, so I would like that.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we send the definition back for lot coverage ordinance 23-001 to the planning board, let them discuss it at their next meeting, then come back with a full ordinance for us to look at at our April meeting.
Lauren, did you have a?
I just was going to note that when he brings it back, it'll be brought back for you to schedule a public hearing. So you still have to schedule a public hearing after that.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And I will just add that the further advantage of that is that you'll have both related ordinances on the same track at that point. So I think that'll be helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next, item 8D, discussion consideration of ordinance 23-04, an ordinance declaring speed limits on state North Carolina roadways within the town of Dutton. Drew?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is another item of follow-up and follow-on from your retreat. You'll recall at the retreat we discussed some speed limits, and your direction was to ask DOT to not seasonally adjust NC 12. So really, it's north of Snow Geese is where that, basically from Snow Geese to the Currituck County line, where that seasonally adjusts to 45. In the off-season, the council's direction was to ask DOT to not seasonally adjust. And then you looked at a bunch of maps and tables that showed different speed limits and where they were set by DOT, where they weren't, where there was some confusion or disparity between our ordinance and what was in the DOT's map. So what's before you tonight is an ordinance change. So it would change the schedule of speed limits within our ordinance. And once that's adopted, you'll tell me, make that happen with DOT. And there's a series of documents that I will need to file with them. And you have that in a summary of that in your packet. There's a repeal and establish. There's two different things we need to do with speed limits. And it all follows your direction, but we need to take the steps to get all the paperwork done with DOT. The slide just summarizes, says if DOT controls the speeds on their roads, the council in an incorporated municipality may ask DOT to set certain speed limits. It's still up to them. I think you heard from the folks here at DOT at your retreat that what you're asking is not unreasonable. It'll still go through their process. So what we're asking you tonight is to adopt this new schedule of speed limits that will be in your ordinance. So this is Schedule 1 within your Chapter 71 of the Town of Duck Code of Ordinance. Once the ordinance is adopted, again, I will, at your direction, go ahead and file the paperwork with NCDOT. So all the tables, all the information you have is basically, I've taken your orders, putting it into an ordinance, and then asking you to adopt an ordinance and tell me, make this happen with DOT. So with that, I will just stop talking and answer any questions.
On one of the slides, you showed a 45-mile speed limit, and am I missing something that I'm not on the right table?
So on this one here, it does say 45, and that's the current. And then there's we showed this to you at the retreat, desired as a question mark. The desired was 35.
Could you just go back one
Certainly.
slide? Because there was that one. Is that 45 at the bottom?
So this is the current ordinance as it's in. This isn't what we're asking you to adopt.
Okay.
What we're asking you to adopt is what's in your packet.
The only question I have, because we did have a lot
Right.
of little courts that had, the wrong speed limit and everything, and that's all good. And I just want to clarify on the 135 mile an hour limit, actually we have two, but the NC 12 from Wampum north at 35. And so that's basically saying what that was what we discussed at the retreat, to make that a constant 35. And so by doing it here in the ordinance, then it goes to the DOT saying that, yes, this is what the town wants. Now we'll do the necessary paperwork and sanction it or come back if there's a problem.
Right, so, and the reason that it's worded differently is because right now there's two different speed zones. So there's one from Wampum to Snow Geese, which is 35, and then from Snow Geese to the Currituck County line, that's 45. So what we're saying now, following your direction, is you want it to all be 35 all the time. So rather than having two separate lines in your ordinance to cover really the same stretch of road, just do it in one line from Wampum all the way north. So the speed limit will transition from 25 to 35, and it will remain that way.
I thought that was at Sandy Ridge. Am I wrong about that? I'm not a big northern traveler, but.
Just the way it's worded here, it's not accurate.
It's not, it's in the area, so it's done by mileage, and the mileage
Okay.
is in there.
So Wampum isn't exactly the exact street.
So it's three-quarters of a mile north of Wampum.
Thank
I'm just saying that, just to trying to get you in the right order, but it is closer, it's probably closer to Sandy Ridge than Wampum, but.
DOT always has to measure from a
State road.
state road.
And that's a state road. You're right. Sandy Ridge is private. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to get that granular, but I just wanted to understand it. Thank you.
So one unintended consequence of this is a registered, street-ready golf cart can travel through the whole town of Duck, correct? It's 35 miles an hour.
That's correct.
Well, they can in the summer.
And they
anyway.
can in the summer.
They can in the summer
Right.
because
Oh,
that
that's
road
true.
goes down to 35 in the summer, so.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 23-04, an ordinance amending ordinance 22-01, declaring speed limits on state of North Carolina roadways in the town of Duck.
Any discussion of the motion on the floor?
Add to that motion that approve that ordinance amendment and direct staff to file the necessary paperwork with NCDOT.
Yes, and direct staff to file necessary documents with DOT to request these changes.
Any further discussion on the ordinance, the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That's it.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you for keeping us straight.
Thank you, Council.
The last item of new business, discussion consideration of authorizing the town manager to execute a contract for duck trail improvements between Blue Heron Lane and Waxwing Lane, adjoining the Sandling neighborhood with HHLD.LLC. Sandy.
Good evening, council. If you're as tired as I am, then I know I'm going to make this quick. It's one up. Got it. Perfect. All right, you probably remember this from the retreat. Promote an enhanced Duck Road, Duck Trail, and pedestrian experience. Well, following the retreat, we had our bid opening on for the trail improvements between Blue Heron and Waxwing Lane. These proposed improvements for this coming year with, this is not the right thing, sorry. Tired. The project details for this part of the trail improvements, there's 843 linear feet of asphalt path will be removed and replaced with concrete. 115 linear feet of a small aging retaining wall will be removed and reconstructed. Bid details, this was an informal bid because it's under $500,000. We did direct solicitation to 9 different contractors, and we also posted it on the website. Our bid opening occurred on February 17th, 2023. We had 2 bids received. Our engineer, and just based on what's been happening in the past since COVID, market and labor force impacts are definitely driving the bid process. The 2 bids that we did get came from Fred Smith Company and the HHLD LLC. Fred Smith is $210,500 and HHLD is $144,304. Our engineering cost estimate came in at $115 and change, but he also had a 20% contingency due to unknowns in the current market, bringing his project range up to $138,000. So $144,000 is not too far removed from what Joe Anloff came up with. Both of these bids that we received exceed the $120,000 that we have budgeted for the duck trail repaving for 2022-2023. However, if the additional $45,000 budgeted for stormwater improvements along the duck trail adjoining Sanderling are included in this number, then we have $165,000, which will cover the trail improvements, any tree trimming we have, any remaining engineering costs associated with the project. Bids are also only valid for about 45 days. So what town is, staff is asking for council to authorize us to sign a contract with HHLD to proceed with the trail improvements between Blue Heron and Waxwing Lane. With that, I'll entertain questions.
Will this finish these sidewalks in Sanderling completely now?
Yes, yes, yes.
How soon would they start and start and stop? I'm sorry.
My hope would be that they will be starting, they'll be starting as soon as we can get a signed contract. I know some of the companies that did not bid because they were already booked up through April and were not going to be able to complete the project in the time frame allotted.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the contract with HHLD LLC. Hey, Sandy, you took it off the board.
I didn't do it.
For
$144,304.
$144,304 to finish the sidewalks in Sanderling.
And that would also include the replacement of that small retaining wall.
Okay.
And give staff the authority to execute that contract.
And give you guys authority to execute the contract.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I'm a
Is
little
the
ahead.
budget amendment only 24,000?
So
Yep.
we had allocated 120 for paving and 45,000 for related stormwater improvements along Duck Trail. So the combination of those two is sufficient funds to cover this cost.
Even though the stormwater isn't going to be addressed.
No, we started to take a different approach, and rather than trying to replace 100 linear feet of concrete with permeable pavement, we started working with property owners to try and do some dry pond, small swales. However, those property owners were not interested in entertaining an easement due to the lack of perceived need at this point, since we've been in a drought for 2 years. I'm sure it'll come back around at some point.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Sandy. Item number 9, items referred to in presentations from the town attorney.
I have none.
Thank you. Item number 10, items referred to in presentations from the town manager.
I think council's heard enough from me tonight, so I'll ask our department directors, Chief Black, and then Mr. Hurd, Chief Ackerman, Ms. Nickens, and then Ms. Barnes.
And I will be brief. You heard enough from me at the beginning. Thank you for the little excitement out there. I apologize for that. They were very excited. I'll be quick tonight. Again, it's March 1st, so we just finished February last night, so some of my numbers will be off just a little bit. We'll start with calls for service, and I'm going to talk about this training this weekend. This is one of the pictures from the training down in Buxton this weekend of Jake. I just thought it was a really great picture of him and the intensity. I will tell you that Jake the instructors that were brought in, which I'll tell you more about in a minute, voted him best performer of the weekend. He killed it. So yeah, expect nothing less from him, as you know. Year to date, we've had 38 calls. Again, we're good. Nothing crazy, nothing too much, too little. Actually, we are down in February compared to last year. There are 17 calls, 10 this year. What I'll say about our 10 calls in the rescue, 11 around the medical calls, were actually have all been fairly significant. I'll highlight one. It was someone having chest pain here in town. Our folks got there quick. EMS got him to the hospital. They flew him out. He ended up having a major blockage and walked in 3 days later and said thank you. So definitely timely between Duck Fire and EMS to get him where he needed to be, which was off the beach. So that was really cool to have him come in and say thank you. From the pie chart here, you can see a little lighter, less colors, which is a good thing, you know. Medical call, green, we had some alarm activations. The red is a fire. It actually is a mutual aid call, but I do bring it out in case you heard about it. I was golfing at Seascape and came upon a large structure fire of a shed, and I was first on scene, so I was there till 13 got there. So that's why it's shown as a fire. Again, we were down. Interesting little graph. You don't normally see that. And I'll end with all those. We have 172 training hours that were put in the computer after this weekend. It was a 3-day event. There's 24 hours of possible training for several of our firefighters. I'll update those numbers for our records, and 20 inspections. So let me take 2 minutes, and I'm out of here, not even 1 minute. This weekend, the Office of the State Fire Marshal came down with all these instructors, including a couple of our folks that assisted Cameron Whitaker and Jeffrey Del Monte because they've been through this school. Along with Dare County Association of Fire Officers, we co-sponsored, but they came down to do an advanced class. So we always do back to the basics in a lot of things. They came down and did a class, a survival class, basically, a firefighter survival class, really intense. I went down on Saturday. I just have a few pictures. On the left, you've got Deputy Chief Bachelet at the command board working with one of the Southern chiefs. On the right, you can't really see a whole lot, but that's Brandon Boyd in the dark Buxton Burn building. They actually have a dummy there that they're trying to, it's simulating a downed firefighter, and they're trying to get him out. I just want to throw a couple pictures in here. Let me go back real quick. 8 full-time firefighters from Duck participated down there. 1 volunteer went down, and 2 of our part-timers were there. Of course, everyone can't go because we actually have to cover Duck, but we were well represented in how well we did. So it was pretty cool. Here's a couple other pictures. You can see the intensity. The top right there is, you all know Cameron and Jeffrey, and that's a dummy there, or a mannequin. They're working hard on the right up there, and there's the folks there on the left as well. And then this is a great picture. It's not actually of our folks, but to give you an idea of the intensity of the training under live fire conditions, because the state was in, that's a dummy that is dressed as a firefighter. You can only do that with this training. We can't go do this because you can't simulate that like that unless you're in the specific training. But they put them in high heat conditions with fire to basically rescue mannequins all weekend, and they go under things, through things. It's really intense training. Our folks did amazing. So did the beach. Every department was represented with folks there. And with that, I will end with Cameron's picture. Cameron helped coordinate this with the state. It's never been done east of 95. He's been working on this 2 years with the idea and a full year of doing this. Not a cheap class. It was through funding through the fire officers and a ton of in-kind and actual cash donations to get everyone here. Really impressive stuff. I have a ton of pictures if you want to see, but Duck was well represented. Have a good night. I'm short. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, or starting off with some figures, you can see actually significantly down from last year's high for building permits in general. But curiously enough, as you go down that column, trade permits, so that's your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that kind of thing. Actually saw an increase, but overall, we are seeing a decrease back to more normal numbers than what we had last year. You can see on these maps, it's very well dispersed throughout the town, so no particular areas of activity. No new construction permits issued, and only one substantial improvement there. So we're getting right on to the projects. First of all, our RCCP, you heard the presentation from VHB at your retreat, and right now, or shortly thereafter, VHB made their recommendations. In other words, they identified different options for each neighborhood, each basin that they were studying. And they have a survey that's open until March 13th that invites the residents and property owners in those areas to comment on which of those options they see as most viable in their community. So we're getting the input, we got input up front, now we're beginning to get that input on the recommendation side. And the big important thing there is that open house on March the 30th. That'll be another opportunity for people to come in person to share their thoughts and ideas with representatives from VHB. So this was my staff had a little bit of fun with this in terms of the interim and us gradually crawling closer to getting this project permitted and on the books. So Cindy Cross has certainly been following up with all the agencies to try to do what she can to keep everybody on track. And VHB is doing the same. We have meetings scheduled with them to talk about moving forward based on comments we received from some of the environmental agencies. So we'll see how all that goes, but we have some good opportunities here to move it forward and get past that hurdle. So that's getting closer to fruition. And finally, our beach grass planting. We did want to let you know that Emerald Forest will begin their paid planting contract next week. So we'll begin to see them. And Cindy, if I understood right, they're going to start in the northern part of the town and work their way south. So we have the volunteer play program that you all are well aware of. We've completed 18 of those. We're trying to squeeze in a few more before it gets too warm. So you can see the dates on there. March 2nd is the next scheduled one at Old Duck Road, 3:30 for anybody who's interested. And then next week, March 8th and March 9th. It just depends on how far they get, where those are going to be located. But you're welcome, and please spread the word about those in the community. And that's all I had for you tonight, but be glad to answer any questions. All right.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening. Promised to be even shorter than everyone else. Real quick snapshot of February. traffic enforcement actions at 35, just one vehicle crash. Of course, what dominated our activity is our business checks and property checks, which of course is what we do during our off-season. Only one arrest and a total just over 1,000 calls for service during the month. All the LPR data is displayed here, but is also posted on the website for all to see and look at. No big surprises in there for the month. I want to remind everybody that our unused medication drop box is available during business hours. The one thing we're starting to see is people dropping off empty prescription bottles to us. We had a trash bag full of drugs dropped off, and of that, there were 5 bottles that actually had medication still in it. So I just want to remind everybody, we can't dispose of that for people. That has to end up in the trash, and we're just disposing of the actual medications. We just recommend that people scratch their names off those bottles and throw them away or recycle them as appropriate. We will be participating in the National Take Back Day in April on that Saturday, so we encourage everybody to come out. Most of our residents are well aware of the program and participate every time we do this. So with that, I'll wrap it up and take any questions. I promised I'd be short.
Good job.
Thank you, Chief.
Kay, do you need the chief back there? Oh, sorry. She got it.
All righty, good evening, everybody. First of all, I do want to say that there was an issue with the YouTube buffering and the connection dropped. So for anybody who is watching now, I will be stitching together the previous link and the current link that you are now watching. I did get that out during the meeting, so people were able to tune back in, and I got that out. But there will be a complete posted video shortly. So it does take time for that to happen, but I just wanted to let people know that that will be coming, and I'll make sure that it gets out when I have it ready. All right, so again, everybody loves a good brick project. So the bricks are on the way. They are expected to be delivered on March 10th, so we will get to that sooner than we thought, and Betsy will be reaching out to volunteers, so there will be some volunteer opportunities coming up shortly. We do have a couple of events lined up. Nature on the Boardwalk is returning, and those dates are in April and May. If you are interested in doing those, just email events@townofduck.com, and we will get you on the list. And then we are really excited about the Bias Speaker Series returning. Our first one back is going to be Thursday, March 16th, and we have Josh Nelson from the National Park Service coming to talk about the Freedmen's Colony of Roanoke Island. So it's a really neat topic. There's been a lot that's been unearthed lately, and I think they actually just got a grant to install an interpretive trail along the Sound. So there's a lot of new historical data and information that's come out, and so Josh is going to be coming to tell us about that. There's a light reception at 6:30, and then the lecture starts at 7. And in my communication world, the communication survey that I mentioned during the retreat is live, and I launched it yesterday in our e-news and on our website, and we've already gotten several responses that have great feedback, so thank you to those of you who have responded, and if not, you have until June 1st, but people have really taken the time to give us feedback and comments, so I really appreciate that, because it's really important, as you've heard, as we kind of move forward as a town. So I'll keep pushing that out. Also, Nextdoor is active. I will be sending out outreach information about how to access that and how to use Nextdoor, essentially, so that will be going out as well. And then I'm very happy to say that the LDPI grant for last year is finally closed. So we are moving forward with the 2023 grant that is in the works, but I just wanted to update council because I know Mr. Shiano had mentioned that there were some pending items with that. And also Jazz Festival, jazz, everything's jazz right now. I have submitted a couple of grants. We are looking at bands to come in and also seeking out new sponsorships and basically, we're in the planning stage. So if you have anything jazz-related that you would like to throw at us, please throw it at us, because right now is the time to throw it at us. And with that, I will take any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kate.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give you a quick finance update for February. I'm not going to go into too much detail because you just heard a lot from me at retreat. So I'm going to jump right in with the monthly cash balance. We ended February 28th with $19,027,832. Just our general fund balance was $15,266,000. And then if you compare it to last February, the general fund balance, it's been a 19% increase. The general checking account balance as of February 28th was $1,448,926. This is 9.5% of our general fund cash balance. We usually keep around 10. And then the remaining funds are in the investment accounts, the majority being in the capital management trust. This just shows a comparison of our revenues that we have budgeted for fiscal year '23 compared to the year to date and last year. I'm going to go into those a little more detailed. Sales and use tax was for the November collections. This was less than 1% decrease compared to last year, but we're still up 13.7%. Property taxes, we received collections through January 31st. This was a 22% decrease compared to last year, but still year to date, we're 99.3% collected so far. Motor vehicle tax was also for collections through January. This was an 11.9% increase from last year. Occupancy tax was for the December collections. You'll see it's kind of a weird 46% decrease compared to last year. I put January in there because I was kind of intrigued why it was so different, because last year we had a big increase. All in all, we had a decrease in the past 2 months of $570. So what it showed me is more people came for Thanksgiving than Christmas. ABC profits and mixed beverage tax. This was for the collections for October through December of last year. This was a 30% decrease compared to the same quarter in the prior year. However, the prior year we saw very unusual amounts, so it was a lot higher than we expected. And then investment earnings, as you know, they're still continuing to rise, but they're not as dramatic as they were kind of later in 2022. We had investment earnings of just over $49,000 for February. And then here we have a comparison of our year-to-date expenditures compared to our budget. And then just to compare our revenues versus expenditures for February, we were higher in our revenues by $295,363. And does anybody have any questions? No? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Jessica.
Item number 11, the mayor's agenda. I really only have one item on here tonight. I have my mayor and chairman meeting probably scheduled for Manio on the 21st. The only other thing I'd like to do is thank the staff for an excellent retreat. Your planning and preparation and contribution during those 2 days was excellent, and I know that all of council appreciates that, so thank you very much. With that, we'll go into basically council members' agenda, starting with our Mayor Pro Tem, Monica Thibodeau.
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't have much, but I would like to echo your thanks for a really good, productive retreat. I thought that was really well done, and it's always a really good use of our time, and I appreciated it, how efficient everything went. So let me say that publicly. I forgot to ask either the PIO or you, Town Manager, about any word on beach nourishment changes other than the last email that you sent to us, because I'm getting questioned on that and want to get that out to the public for my own personal needs.
We did get some updates today, and we'll be pushing that out, and I'll get it out to council tomorrow morning. They should be putting matting down at the FRF later this week in getting the subline installed in Duck. They're still on track for right around the 15th of March to begin dredge operation.
And do you know if they'll be connecting with the More Beach to Love website through the county, or are we just going it alone in terms of public information?
I'll let Kay follow up with More Beach to Love, but we'll be communicating that, and I know Kay provides information to them as well, but we'll be sure to follow up with them on that. Because so the project now is affecting Southern Shores and Duck. So they have started to move some of their equipment into Hillcrest to mobilize, and that's mainly focused on getting that matting out on the FRF property. And Adam Priest from Coastal Protection Engineering has been coordinating with the folks at the FRF about that.
So March 15th is when we're maybe...
That's still the target. That could wiggle, a few days on either side of that, but that's still the target based on the last information we had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Councilmember Rob Mooney.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Councilmember Sandy Whitman.
Nothing this evening.
Thank you, Sandy. Councilmember Tony Channel.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Tony. At this time, I'm going to open up public comments. Anyone in the audience would like to address the council, please come forward to the podium and limit your comments to 3 minutes. There being none, we'll close public comments. And
Item 14.
yes, item 14.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to enter into closed session in accordance with Section 143-318, 11A3, in order to confer with the town attorney regarding a matter within the attorney-client privilege and to preserve that privilege.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor of going into closed session, please say aye. Aye. We are now in closed session. We are now out of closed session. I would ask the town attorney, Lauren, to report.
Thank you. The council met in closed session. We discussed matters, legal matters, which are protected by attorney-client privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before council this evening? There being none, I'll remind council the next scheduled meeting will be the regular meeting on Wednesday, April 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. With that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye. 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 We are now adjourned.
Thank you.